Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, the first 5 years of Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and specifically 2 adventures from that publishing section of Dungeons & Dragons. And the 2 adventures we're going to talk about today are Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Alright, so I want to talk about these 2 adventures because they are components of the first 5 years of publishing for Dungeons & Dragons. So the first 5 years of publishing for Dungeons & Dragons are pretty epic. There were 24 products. There was 3 core rule books, 3 box sets, 7 source books, and 11 adventures. And these are 2 of the adventures within that group of 11 adventures. We're going to talk about these together because these are actually they're literally tied together as products, right? They're both tied together by their location, right? Which is Waterdeep. Now, why didn't I say setting? Well, the reason why is Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition really doesn't have setting books. It has adventure books and source books, and it puts setting across them like spice, right? Really kind of it's an interesting perspective. It's an interesting approach. It's one of the few things I don't like about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. I really think they would have been better off with some setting books, but here we are. All right, so let's talk about these 2 books. So, Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage are really unique in a lot of different ways. So they're special, right? Especially within 5th Edition. So one of the things is there are 2 of the few books within 5th Edition that take, so these 2 books, if you have these 2 adventure books, Waterdeep Dragon Heist takes player characters from level 1 through level 5, right? And then Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage takes characters from level 5 all the way up to level 20, right? And actually, there's some of the few adventures that actually come out as canon from Wizards of the Coast that actually deal with levels of play at level 15 and 20. It's really quite interesting, right? So that's what's really interesting about them. They also are very interesting from the perspective that what do they accomplish within 5th Edition as a paired group of books? Well, one, they continue to carry on tradition, right? And what is that tradition? Well, Forgotten Realms as the preeminent setting, right? So there's a lot of debate about what is the official. Well, we already know what the official setting of 5th Edition is. It is the multiverse, right? Which is kind of an answer that few people really like, right? Like, I think a lot of people would be more comfortable if it was just stated, hey, Forgotten Realms is the official setting. And I think one of the reasons why it's so frustrating is, Forgotten Realms is acknowledged, Greyhawk is acknowledged, Ravenloft is acknowledged, but, where's Spelljammer? Where is Dark Sun? Where is, some of these, we are getting Eberron, right? But where are some of these, where's Oriental Adventures, right? Where are some of these these beloved settings that aren't even really acknowledged at all, right, within 5th Edition? Or they're acknowledged in very, askew ways, right? Like, I think there is actually a samurai within 5th Edition at this point, right? So, but they're very, so it is a tradition of solidifying Forgotten Realms, and it's a big deal because Forgotten Realms has been around since 2nd Edition, right? And its legend has just grown and grown and grown. And that's important to understand that, to recognize that, right? What else is, so basically you have that aspect, right, of continuing these traditions, right? And they also, they take us deeper into Forgotten Realms and kind of expose Forgotten Realm, they reveal more of Forgotten Realms than was revealed before. And also it's important to understand that when these books were chosen to be made, this is saying, hey, let's double down on Forgotten Realms. Let's make Forgotten Realms deeper than it currently is. And that is displacing new settings. There are no new settings for 5th Edition, right? I really think it's the only setting that Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition is the only edition that has introduced no new settings, right? Very, very interesting. All right. So let's talk about a little bit about the stories and what's in Dungeons and Dragons, what's in Dragon Heist, and what is in so what's specifically within Dragon Heist and what's within the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, right? Well, in Dragon Heist, essentially, the player characters are tasked. They're quested by I think his name was Volathamp Gadarm, right? And he actually involves the player characters, quests them to get involved, to go search out 500,000 gold pieces, right? 500,000 gold pieces that have been lost in the city, right? And so the players are sent off to do this job, right? Well, one of the things that's really unique about this adventure is the seasons, right? So it has these seasons, and when you encounter these seasons, you can choose fall or winter or spring or summer, and it will bring forward one of the 4 villains that are in there. And the 4 villains are really interesting. You have some secret devil worshippers. There's some nobles of the city. There's some mad. There's like these mad beholders, right? And it's quite a few, and of course also there's the drow in there. There's a drow as well, which is really interesting. So you have these different factions, and the players are going to interact with these different factions as they go forward. But one of the things that's really unique about this adventure is really set in a way that, what's the best way to explain it? Oh yeah, so it's set in a way where the focus for the player characters is subterfuge. It's like reconnaissance, right? It's these really non-combat oriented different types of activity, right? There's some investigation, there's some sabotage in there as well. It's really, really quite interesting, but the reality is you have this situation where the players are really being encouraged and being taught, don't hack and slash, don't kick doors down. You're going to have to use some subtlety here. You're going to have to, you're really going to have to pull back on a lot of that stuff. All right, no hack and slash. It's really kind of like the rules of it. One of the things that's interesting, though, that I thought was Dragon Heist it really isn't a heist, right? Like, if you watched a heist movie, it's interesting they chose that word, because Dragon Heist really isn't a heist at all. It's much more of like investigation and research and a lot of diplomacy checks and things like that. And also, there's really no way for the player characters to walk off with that 500,000 in gold, which is really quite frustrating, right? Like, if you're going to put that in front of players and then make sure that they don't get it, it seems kind of odd and a little unfair to me. So one of the aspects of the adventure I didn't enjoy. Now, when the players finish this, right, there is a warm handshake, before they go over to deal with this insane wizard below Undermount, right? And that guy's name is Hallister Blackcloak, and he has set up this entire huge dungeon. There's like 23 levels of this dungeon, and he has stocked it with all these different things to protect different things, to protect all the treasures that he has amassed within the dungeon, right? Now, the reason why Dungeon of the Mad Mage exists is this is, again, like, Dungeons & Dragons is one of the most recursive products that have ever existed. It really is constantly referring back to itself, constantly referring back to itself, constantly referring back to itself. So basically, when you're looking at this, you're getting into the history of the game with mega dungeons, right? And this is the closest thing you could find as an official product within Dungeons & Dragons that would qualify as a mega dungeon, right? The other thing that you're seeing here is the Dungeon of the Mad Mage has very little in the way of plot, right? This truly is, you're in this dungeon, you're going to quest through this dungeon, maybe you make it out the other end alive, maybe you don't. Very, very close to the game's origin of actual dungeon delving within within the 70s and the 80s and even in the 90s. And frankly, even 4th edition, really it had a dungeon. 4th edition had this really pretty amazing product, which was, I think it was literally called Dungeon Delves. And it was very much like you're in a dungeon, kill that bugbear, and take the loot that's in the corner, right? Now, this is really interesting to me. I think it's interesting that the Waterdeep duology exists, right? And I think it's really nice that within Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, there are these products that 2 books will allow you to take if you have the core rule books. So if you have the core rule books and you have Dragon Heist and you have Dungeons of the Mad Mage, you could take characters through level 1 all the way to level 20. That's exciting. That's a really neat aspect of the 2 games. And I also understand why the game wants to point back to that heritage of dungeon delving. I do think I think it's a little dangerous. I don't think that the Dungeon of the Mad Mage was that well received. And the reason why is, when that came out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, entertainment wasn't what it is today, right? So the idea of, you go into this room, there's a monster, slay the monster, there's a chest in the corner, open the chest, get the gold, and go on to the next room. And actually, maybe you're mapping all the, we have fond memories of that. I'm not sure that's really useful today, right? I feel like narrative overall for tabletop role-playing games has really kind of progressed beyond this, right? But it is really interesting to just think about why this book was made and to really give some thought and about the design team saying, hey, we've got to honor history, right? And so I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing that design teams are saying, we have a rich, robust history here. We don't want to throw that out. I like to see them do new and innovative stuff, but at the same time, that has to be balanced with a respect for tradition and respect for the history of the game. It's really a lot like jazz, which is another element of Americana. You're doing new stuff, but you're also, making sure you're aware of and respectful and knowledgeable of the old stuff. And so I think overall, Dragon Heist and Dungeons of the Mad Mage are really, really unique. They are special in that they both are set within Waterdeep, and it's a big deal too to recognize that this new generation of streamers, right? They're now aware of Waterdeep, and that's going to point them to the Drow. That's going to point them to Dritz. That's going to point them to the rich narrative history that Dungeons & Dragons has, and I think that's all a good thing. Thank you very much for letting me share these ideas today with you about these 2 adventures within the core 11 adventures that came out in the first 5 years of Dungeons & Dragons. It's really cool to be celebrating 5 years of history just for 5th edition alone. It really is a wonderful game. Thank you very much. If you've played either one of these adventures, please let me know what you think in what your thoughts are below. And please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.